Welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD, BlenderHD. You want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Friday, May 17th. You know what we do on Fridays? We take a look at the UFC card coming up tomorrow. It's fight night, something, whatever number, 97 or I don't know. I'm just going to make up a number. They're in the Apex. It's going to be 12 fights tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern start time. Hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door. Give me those thummy thumbs. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. We'll also have crunch time tomorrow with obviously here, John Breslin, SquirrelPatrol, as well as Mike. And if you're a premium member, they'll have the Ground and Pound podcast up today, the expert survey. We got all the ownership, the player projections, the simulations. We always love those. So sign up for RotoGrinders Premium. All the information is in the description. You can now 6-month package, you get $250 off. So I would definitely do that for the combo premium. You get all the sports. But John, we were saying before the show, take a look at this card. And it feels like, especially the cards after a pay-per-view, it feels like Dana White is just like, yeah, I'm sick of a lot of these people. Let's just throw them all together. We don't care that it's like an 0-2 fighter against another 0-1 fighter. Someone's going to get a win, and someone's probably going to be bagging groceries after the fight because they're not going to be in the UFC anymore. That's kind of like the theme of this card. And then the main event is Laron Murphy versus Edson Barbosa, which if you would have told me that's the main event of any of any card, I mean, I would just be like, I get okay. If that's the main event, I don't even want to know what the hell the prelims look like. Are they just pulling in people off the street? Any overall thoughts other than we always say that this may be a garbage card, like as far as like if you're a UFC fan, but the garbage cards a lot of times are high variance and are good in DFS because people get overconfident about stuff that definitely on this card you should not be overconfident.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Edson Barbosa's second main event in 8 months. Yeah, it's like a kind of a card. It's not the worst card, right? It's not like the lowest level card. You've got a mix of like some people making their UFC debuts, some UFC veterans, some people on their way in, some people maybe on their way out. But yeah, we're kind of getting. I feel like there's like more pay-per-view events this year, but like the cards in between, are a little bit thrown together. It reminds me a little bit of like a baseball slate where there's like nothing going on, right? Where there's like nothing notable going on. No super high strikeout pitchers, no like Coors Field game. So like no teams with really high implied run total, no pitchers, you maybe have to have. But then on those baseball slates, right? Like you get everybody like, concentrating then on like the best pitcher, even though he's not that good. And you have everybody like running to like stack the team that's got like the 4.8 implied run total. And like, well, that's not that much better than the team with the worst implied run total. And it's kind of a slate like that. I was like kind of surprised. I'm always looking at, win probabilities and like first round win probabilities, sorting it by salary. I'm like, wow, there is like not a lot of like first round finish equity on this card. Like a lot of these fights are probably going to go to decision. But yeah, there's maybe some opportunity there because where ownership is going to concentrate and consolidate around a few spots, like if you're running multiple lineups, or even if you're just doing a single entry, maybe you're just going under the field or avoiding those spots.
Well, I could pull up if Steve will pull up the screen. I made my sheet. I mean, I didn't want to. I mean, like that. This was one of the cards where I'm like, oh, I got to put together my Excel spreadsheet. I mean, we have the two contexts okay, we always have to go through the two contextual variables that matters most, especially if we're playing large field contests, is the size of the slate and the spreads of the fights. Now we have a 12 fight card. So that's on the smaller side, not the smallest, but it's smaller side, which means wins matter a bit more, right? Right. If it was a 9-fight card, just getting 6 winners would put you up towards the top, right? And you've been talking the past couple of weeks about prioritizing people that win, even if they don't like hit the nuts, which is a little bit more of a small field GPP mindset. But we also have the spreads of the fights. I mean, most of the 9K range are 3-1, 4-1, 5-1. But I mean, Umar Sy, Tom Nolan, Melissa Gatto, Adrian Yanez, Emily Ducati. I mean, they're all like 80+% to win. And then you got Magomadov at 72%. And then like even Piero Rodriguez at 69% at 8,800. And then in the middle, it's like no one's like, it's like 58, 60. Like those are more in the pick'em range type of fights. But also, like some of these fights, like let's first talk about obviously the main event. Laurent Murphy, 8,500, Edson Barboza, 7,700. Based on the fighting styles, especially Laurent Murphy, like I hope he comes in at 33% owned because I don't know. I know this fight. I know you got 5 rounds to work with, but his fighting style is just like he's plus 210 inside the distance in a 5-round fight. Obviously, Edson Barboza could knock you out. I mean, he's older, but I mean he's known more for like winning early more than not. I don't expect this fight to end early. I expect this fight to go 5 rounds, which makes me like Edson Barboza is going to be highly owned as an underdog. Not necessarily because people necessarily want to play Edson Barboza. Is that once you start getting down into the low ranges, like 7K or below, it's like these guys are very low win probabilities for the slate. And an Edson Barboza decision win for 5 rounds could be 90 points. I mean, like, I think like the winner of this fight probably scores 85, 90 points. You're not going to see much wrestling. It's just going to kind of be kickboxing and probably slower paced. Are you going to be? I mean, I'm assuming when the Sims come out that the main event fighters will be up there because it's a 5-round fight. Obviously, that it maybe Barbosa a little bit more so than Murphy, but I think it's going to be one of these main events where the Sims are going to be much lower than we've seen on other slates. Unless you have a different take. Like my natural inclination is like this seems like the type of card where naturally, the field tends to over own the main event, and I'll just let them do it.
I'm a little bit higher on it, I think, than you are. And I think the reason is maybe I just kind of like Laurent Murphy to win the fight. And I think Edson Barboza is going to be highly owned. And so I think Laurent Murphy is a reasonable kind of leverage point. I think it is probably going to go the distance. There's just not a lot of like first round win equity on the card. Like I mentioned, you've got Tom Nolan, who's got really good odds to win in the first round. Omar Sy also has pretty good odds, and I guess Magomedov and Yanez, right, are the 4 guys who like have pretty good odds to win in the first round. Some of those guys are really expensive, and they're really not that high volume if they don't win in the first round. So Laurent Murphy, yeah, it's scheduled to go the distance. Not scheduled to go. Like odds are it's going to go the distance. I think it's about even money to go the distance. But Laurent Murphy's only 8,500. So he might not need to do that much. So I think on, I guess, stack card, if it was like a 15-fight card, I'd be much more inclined to like fade the main event. 12 fights, and we'll see if it stays at 12 because we still have weigh-ins at noon. I don't know. I won't necessarily aim to go under the field on the main event. Like I don't think it's a main event you have to have, but I think it's one that I'll probably have at the field or maybe even a little bit above the field. And it might just be that I'm end up being, looking at our current ownership projections, like I might just be a little bit over the field on Laurent Murphy and under the field on Barboza. I do remember I kind of can't get Barboza's last fight out of my head because it looks great on the box score, but like that was really close to getting stopped in the first round for Sadiq Sadiq Youssef. Right. So Barboza was getting crushed. I was really shocked that I think I needed Barboza to get the win. And so I was rooting for that, and I was watching the first round. I'm like, oh, I'm done. And I'm like, they have to stop this, and they didn't stop the fight. And then Barboza came back and won, and I'm like, oh, this is great, But that's maybe not as good of a win as it looks like in the game log. So I do kind of think that, Lerone Murphy is favored and he's going to be the lower owned probably. And so if some of these like higher price guys like Tom Nolan, like Adrian Yanez, like if some of these guys falter, then I think Lerone Murphy could be very useful at 8,500, even if he's just putting up 90 points, 92 points in a 5-round win.
So from a game theory perspective, as far as building your lineups, now I can admit, obviously, on smaller field contests, Lerone Murphy has more value with the win equity because you don't need anywhere close to the nuts in those types of contests. But if you were constructing a lineup with Lerone Murphy at 30, 32, 34 something percent owned, those types of lineup basically you're sacrificing probably someone at the upper end. Would you be more likely to like not play those fighters? So like, for instance, like on a slate where Lerone Murphy is in the optimal with 90 points, it's a slate where Nolan lost or Yanez lost or Magomedov lost. Like not I'm not talking about even winning with a low score, but just like they literally lost. And you'd be more inclined to play, maybe you play one of those 9K. Like you don't play multiple of them. You play one of them, like one of those guys wins and scores a lot, but one of them literally loses and you're playing the underdog of that fight because you want to compete in the situations where Lerone Murphy can score 90 points and still be optimal, and those would be the cases.
Yeah, that's actually that's my dummy lineup that I'm using right now to reserve the reserve contest. Is that my guess is one of these guys in the upper 9,000s is going to win and put up a high score. But I think people are going to be trying to jam in multiple of them, and I think that might be a mistake because it's probably just going to be one of them wins in the first round. And I do think they're going to be kind of low scoring if they don't get the first round win. They're just not that high volume. So I might end up under the field on the upper 9K range, which has been a good philosophy. And like part of that philosophy is that they have really good win odds in the upper 9K range. That means they have really bad win odds in the 7,200 and below range. So the way you might try to do your lineups is like a stars and scrubs kind of thing, right? Where you've got a couple of guys, as many guys as you can fit in the upper 9K range, and then you're picking the opponents of the other guys in the 7,000 below 7,000 range, right? Like that's very unlikely to hit, because their win probabilities for all of them in the 7,200 and below just aren't that high. So like the chances that multiple of those fighters win is like not like you're making lineups that like have much less chance of getting like 6 wins than I think people might realize relative to like sticking a little bit in the middle range.
Right. So like if you're going to play like Tom Nolan, then you're going to play Vinicius Salvador against Yanez. If you're going to play Yanez, you may play, Warley Alves against Abus Magomedov. But you wouldn't do a lineup where it's like I'm playing like 2 of the underdogs against like Nolan, Yanez, and Magomedov. The most likelihood is that the most likelihood is all 3 of them win. But then the second is like 2 out of the 3 win. And then, the least likely is all 3 of them lose. So probably you wouldn't throw them all together. But in this 9K range, John, I mean, it's like some of these are like night and day. To me, one sticks out, and I'm not sure what the philosophy you could think of, like just from a heuristic standpoint. So we got Umar Sy, whose ITD and round 1 lines are not out yet because that's like a last-minute replacement against Tuco Tokas. I mean, he's minus 500 to win. I'm assuming his ITD line is going to be minus 200 or so. I mean, it's going to be something. It's going to be something like that. It's light heavyweight. So that's much, knockouts are much more likely to happen. He's a bit more wrestling in his back pocket, I guess. You got Tom Nolan minus 275 inside the distance. Yanez minus 165 inside the distance. Magomedov minus 165 inside the distance. And then you got the 2 female women's MMA favorites. You have the 2 big favorites. Ducati and Gata were both like minus 345, minus 400. Gatto's plus 105 inside the distance. Ducati's plus 400 inside the distance at 9,200. I know I'm my bread and butter in my UFC DFS career is built upon taking these female favored fighters that just destroy this, when they destroy the slate at low ownership, like I'm there winning a lot of money. I can't do it with Ducati because just the fighting style. I mean, the Ducati versus the only reason that she's minus 400 is that Vanessa Demopoulos is just a punching bag, right? Demopoulos, like, essentially has to, like, fall to guard and hope for an armbar. That's it. But Gatto, on the other hand, like, Gatto's win condition to score 100 plus points is typically submission, quicker submission. And against Tamiris Vidal, who, I mean, has nothing to write home about, I feel like I want to play I want to be over the field and play more of Melissa Gatto at plus 105 inside the distance. Here's the problem I have, John. If you play Melissa Gatto at 9,400 at maybe 20% owned, probably even less than that, probably 16% owned, and let's say you do what you were talking about by playing a LaRon Murphy or something like that, like, you're essentially playing Melissa Gatto as your, like, only 9K fighter, she would have to outscore Sai, Nolan, Giannis, Magomed. Like, she would have to be the top scorer amongst all of those. And with all these ITD lines of all these other guys, like, how low probability is it that all those guys win but fail to score 100 points? Like, it's like probably one of these guys gets, like, a first round knockout, a quick win bonus or something like that. And I have to beat out so many other people that I feel like if you were just removed one of these fighters, that there were only like two of them, I'd be like, okay, I think I'm more comfortable playing Gatto. But when you have like four of them that have like more than when you have four fighters that have like a 35+% chance of winning in the first round, it's hard to say that I'm going to take the one that only has a 24% chance of winning in the first round and hoping that all the other ones fail. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to balance, like, that ownership. Like, I feel like I should be playing more Gatto, but it feels like I would play Gatto in lineups where I'm already I'm doing the barbell. I'm playing Nolan Gatto lineups. I'm playing Gatto Magomedov line. Like, I'm not just playing Gatto as the only 9K fighter.
I think my favorite in this range is probably Magomedov, and it's just that he's 9,000. And that's a big difference. There's a big difference between 9,000 and 9,600. In terms of like the win equity that gets you at the bottom of your lineup. I'm realizing I have Umar Sai's numbers wrong in my spreadsheet because I took his inside the distance and first round finish odds from his first fight. That was, I think it was like the second fight.
The originally scheduled fight against Tricoli.
Yeah, I think he's gone through like two. This is his third opponent on this card, and they had full lines out for his second opponent. And I took those accidentally, but it'll probably be somewhat similar, and it'll probably be a little bit better than what I have in my spreadsheet that you can't see here. But I assume it'll be around like the same odds as like Tom Nolan, maybe even a little bit better. But like there's still, and I'm kind of thinking about the Michelle Pereira fight from a few cards ago or a couple cards ago, where he got the second highest score and he got the quick win bonus. And that's all you can ask for at 9,600. And he still was not on the winning lineup, in even the 555, right? The one where you're only trying to beat, 500 other people, or 700 people or whatever. But he wasn't on the large field winning lineup. I don't know. The 96 and $9,500 fighters need a lot to go their way to land on the winning lineup. Gatto is a little bit cheaper at 9,400, and I think she'll be lower owned. And I think she probably has about the same chance of getting on the optimal lineup as Nolan is Sai. So we'll see. I think she'll be under owned, and if she's coming in at like half the ownership of those guys, that's probably too low. Like that's probably too much of a spread. I agree. Like Ducati probably isn't gonna probably doesn't have the volume to get there. Like she's a little bit too pricey for the score she's probably going to put up in a win. Yeah, like
But
looking at
it feels like Ducati. Like if you're playing small field and you want like a very good chance at like 72 or 75
yeah,
points, like she's your girl.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see her like sim results. I'm guessing they're going to be really low
Yes.
because yeah, because like that's a lot of salary to pay for a fighter who in her 2 wins has 82 points and 76 points. Those are her wins. So yeah, like that might be. I mean, I guess any fighter, right? Every fighter has some chance to win in the first round, and so it's a possibility. Her first round odds are less than 10%. So
Right.
it's gonna be difficult to get to her. She seems like somebody that's like, oh, she's gonna be like low owned. She might not be low owned enough. But yeah, Magomedov at 9,000. Then you've got the pricing gap there. Yeah, you see, you've got like a $200 pricing gap. And Magomedov is 9,000. Then Piero Rodriguez is only 8,800. It's kind of interesting. We've got a couple of pricing gaps, right, between like 9,000 and 8,800 and 88 and 8,600.
And I typically like the fighters that are in like that high 8K range because a
Yeah.
lot of times they have the upside to beat out the 9K fighters. It's just that we don't get two of them because they skip those pricing levels. So in the mid range, we haven't failed to mention maybe one of the more popular fights, or the two I think two popular mid range fights. The Garimbo versus Brahmaj fight, which is probably the fight, one of the two fights that are the least likely to make it all the way to the scorecards. Uh, they're both. Garimbo is a little. I mean, Garimbo's favored. He's probably going to wrestle, but he's not like the most experienced fighter. Brahmaj has more experience. He's a wrestler. Most of his wins came via submission. Uh, it feels like the Garimbo Brahmaj fight is a fight that, at their prices, like that someone wins in the first round, second round, like you don't even need 100 points. So like I feel like I want to target this fight. And then we have Chaos Williams versus Carlston Harris. I'm not a big Carlston Harris person. Like, obviously, in this fight, Harris has the wrestling advantage, but it's not like he uses wrestling that much. And a lot of times he sucks the points out of a fight. Like, he's much more likely to like stop Chaos Williams by like clenching against the fence and holding him down in one takedown. But Chaos Williams is plus 115 inside the distance at 8,200, and obviously he's a knockout power puncher. I'm going to assume our Sims are going to love Chaos Williams, because in the instance where the most likely chances where he wins at 8,200, he's going to score a lot of points. He may not score 130 because he's not going to wrestle or anything, but you got 5 minutes. You got, even 10. Like, the thing is that 8,200, a second round finish could put up 90 points, and he could beat out Laurent Murphy, like in a second round knockout. So what are your thoughts on these two mid-range fights? Do you feel like, because Garimbo Brahmaj, I think are going to be very owned. Both sides of this fight are going to be very owned. And I think Chaos Williams is going to be 40+% owned. Does that make you want to play Carlston Harris more? Does that make you want to fade the Garimbo Brahmaj fight? How are you kind of treating this range?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you. I think the Garimbo Brahmaj fight is going to be higher owned. Like, it's going to be higher owned than our ownership projections indicates. I think we've got about like 58% combined ownership on this fight. I'd want to be higher than that. Because I think
you'd want to be higher than that, or do you think it'll be? I think that it may come in at 70%. Like, the ownership will come in at 70, and the question is, do you want to be over that?
I might be over that. I agree. I'll be way over our current ownership projections. And I kind of like Garimbo to win the fight. So I'm trying to think about who am I gonna assign as the SquirrelPatrol takedowns, and I don't know if Brahmaj is gonna get there because I kind of like Garimbo to win the fight. But I do think that whoever wins the fight is probably gonna be high scoring. Like, I think the line on Garimbo maybe isn't high enough. But I think in terms of my DFS lineups, I think that's a fight I want to be over the field on, like particularly Garimbo. It'll put up a lot of points. I think it'll exceed our current ownership projections. will I be over what the eventual like ownership projections are, or what the eventual like real ownership is? I'm not sure, but I'll be over our current projected ownership. The Chaos Williams Carlston Harris fight, yeah, is another good fight to get to in the mid range. I kind of like the Carlston Harris side, like you speculated I might. Right now, I think we've got about a 2-to-1 ownership edge going to Chaos Williams. And Chaos Williams isn't that high volume. Again, he's going to rely on his striking. And so if he gets like the early win, then yeah, that's a huge score. If he doesn't get the early win, like his last 3 wins, 84 points, like 78 and 74. Like that's maybe not enough to get you there. It might be because he's well priced at 8,200. But like if twice as many people are going to own Chaos Williams, yeah, then I definitely want to have Carlston Harris, because Harris can kind of do even less at 8,000 if that makes sense. And so he's a little bit hit and miss with the scoring as well. But I'd take the lesser owned by far of those two fighters in Carlston Harris.
Well, let's talk about the underdogs. Let's talk about the bottom range. Let's talk about the garbage, right? Yeah. Right? Because you see on these cards. I mean, like last week, literally the lowest owned fighter put up like the second highest score on the slate. Like it happens way more frequently than you think, right? Even though it doesn't happen that often. So like a lot of people go at these fighters and they go, they only have a 20% chance of winning. They only have a 12% chance of winning inside the distance. It's like, yeah, but some of these fighters are like 8% owned or 6% owned, like because people don't want to play these fighters. In your takedowns article, which is for premium members, as I said, click on that link in the description. You can even sign up for 1 month. You get $40 off for your first month. So you can feel free to do that. I'm going to consider this range of like supreme underdogs to be Warlley Alves and below. So basically Magomedov's opponents. So because I don't consider Carnelossi at 7,400 or Alan Tengeli at 76 or like Barboth. Like a lot of people don't realize when you watch the fights, like we all know, especially large field players, the slate doesn't start until an underdog wins.
Yeah.
Right? Like really, you're just sitting there waiting because you don't know what the optimal is really going to look like until an underdog wins, and you could say, okay, they're in. Because as of that point, like the highest scoring underdog is currently going to be optimal because you can't play. You have to, every lineup has to contain at least one underdog. And the thing is that every lineup has to contain at least a fighter that's 7,600 or below, because you can't make a lineup with so when like a 70, if Brahimaj is the only underdog that wins, right? And depending on his score, like he may not even be in the optimal lineup. Like a Demopoulos decision loss with 42 points could still be in, because you just can't make lineups with Brahimaj without, like, you couldn't get all the winners in. Like you're not getting 6 winners. So that's why focusing on like these super underdogs, like think of, I tell people, because people like, I can't believe you're taking a shot on X, right? I took a shot on Alonzo Menafield last week that did not work out. Yeah. Okay. Did not, his fight IQ, his game plan, probably not good. Probably not to just go, I'm like a video game. Like I'm just going to press all the buttons at once right in the beginning and just hope that works. And it definitely didn't. The concept that I stress is that it's not about picking the underdog that wins. That's the hardest thing to do. It's being able to embrace the fact that you're taking a shot at someone down there, right? If you're playing one lineup, yes, you have to choose which one you're taking a shot on. But if you're playing a whole bunch of lineups, just making lineups that look like, you may look at Victor Martinez and go, how the hell is this guy? Why is he even in the UFC? And it's like, well, I mean, the betting odds say that he'll win in the first round like 10% of the time. Like, even though you can't visualize that happening, like one of these, right? Alves, Demopoulos, Salvador, Vidal, Martinez, Tokos. Like, when one of these guys wins and they're 10% owned or less, like, that's so valuable. Pick one. Like I'm going to ask you, John, which ones do you like more than the others? But I think we're both under the same mindset that like you may not have a clear one. Like this is the one I like the most by far, could whatever, but just getting out of your comfort zone and saying, yeah, I'm going to embrace. In my 150 set, I'm going to have 3 Tuco Tokos lineups. I'm going to have 2 Victor Martinez lineups. Then you're not like sitting there going, yeah, I feel really good about this.
Right. Yeah. This is what makes content difficult, right? I always think about now when I'm thinking about this kind of thing, I think about the Jacob Malkoun fight where he was like, minus 500 or whatever to beat Cody Brundage, I think. And everyone's just like talking about content, right? The week, and they're going like Malkoun's going to crush him, right? And he's got like a 50% chance to win in the first round. And sure enough, the fight starts. Malkoun like gets Brundage down in the first like minute, right? And he's just pounding his face. And it's like, oh my, this is gonna be like a completely dominant win. And Brundage like kind of turns over. Malkoun hits him in the back of the head, and the ref stops the fight, and asks Cody Brundage like, can you continue? And Brundage is like, no. That's a first round medical disqualification win for Cody Brundage, 90 plus points. But like, how could you describe that happening when you're doing content during the week, right? Like, and you're saying,
well, how about do you remember the fight where Mike Jackson won on the eye pokes, right in the first round?
It sounds like a similar.
Because Mike Jackson is like a photographer. Like the line was like ridiculous. Like he was like a plus 650, plus 700 underdog. Like it was stupid, and he was like 2.5% owned. And he got like 100 and something points, like 102 points because there was a disqualification due to multiple eye pokes. Like those are in those percentages also. So even if you can't visualize, like, I don't see how this guy wins the fight. It's like, dude, have you watched the UFC? We have crazy stuff happen where people don't even know if it should it be a no contest? Can the doctor stop the fight? Can they replay? Can the replay do? I mean, like, dude, right. And it's like, do they just write the rules as we go along type of stuff? So, dude, there's tons of that type of variance in these fights also.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, and you can't describe this stuff, but all I can say is, like, if you're doing multiple lineups, like, all of these fighters have about a 20% chance of winning their fight. So if you combine the 5 of them, one of them is probably going to win. We don't know why. We don't know how. It's possible to describe. I can't give you a reason why you should take Tamara Spidal and put her in your lineup. But she's 6,800. So if she gets that medical disqualification win or whatever happens, then she's probably going to be in the winning lineup. And these fighters are always under-owned. Like, it's shocking these fighters are owned at such a fraction of their win probability. Like Tuco Tokos, I don't know. Omar Sy, I believe, is Omar Sy is making his UFC debut. There's no real. We've seen this happen all the time, and both of them are making their UFC debut. Like, the line should probably be a little bit closer. Like, I know Tokos is coming. I don't know anything about Tuco Tokos, but he's coming in as a late notice replacement. We've seen these fighters do much better than you would kind of expect, even against veteran fighters. A lot of time is like, look, like, Omar Sy's got to go in there and kind of fight whoever they're going to line up next. And so he's been preparing for one fighter, then that fight got canceled. Preparing for the next fighter, that fight got canceled. Now he's got this guy, Tuco Tokos. Omar Sy probably doesn't know who he is either. So how's he preparing for the fight? And that's maybe an edge for, Tuco Tokos. Like 6,600 is really cheap. That does actually allow you to get in 2 of the, higher priced fighters. You play Tokos, then you can play Tom Nolan and Melissa Gatto, and the salary is not such a big deal. So like, I won't have like more than 20% Tokos, but you should maybe consider having up to 20% because that's the win probability. And and similar argument for Victor Martinez and Tamira Spidal and and Venetia Salvador. I think Vanessa Demopoulos, I believe, is coming off another upset win where she was a huge underdog, and she had plus 300 or something. She got the win, scored less than 60 points. That's okay. She's only 7,000 on the card. So I mean, you should strongly be considering all of these underdogs, even though the instinct, especially when you're hand building, especially when you're doing one lineup, is to just skip over them entirely and jam in the same $7,600 fighter that has good seeming win equity because that's who everybody else is going to try to jam into.
Right, Peter Corey in the chat is talking about cash games.
Yeah.
Like last week, while Despain was so high, like because Despain lost last week, was so highly owned in cash. It was such a volatile fight, so it should have been GPP only. Projections just don't understand volatile heavyweight fights. I mean, that's the one thing about projections in general is that you're looking at mean projections, but the distribution is not normal. So, like, if you're building cash lineups, like cash should be you're aiming for as close to a median result as possible, but you're not looking at medians. You're looking at means, and these are very like bimodal distributions as the volatility of the fight goes up. So, for instance, I'd be much more like if you told me that you were gonna play Emily Ducati over Abus Magomedov in cash games, like I wouldn't fault you for it because like the likelihood of Tamiris Vidal winning inside the distance or the Vanessa Demopoulos winning inside the distance is low enough that even if you lose, you're probably going to still get like 45 points, 50 points. And if she wins the decision, you get 80. Like it's her median is her distribution is so much more normal as opposed to like Tom Nolan, whose outcomes could be like he gets 120 a bunch of the time, but he also gets 60 a bunch of the time. Like even though the median the mean projection is 86, like there's probably not that many outcomes. Like the mode, like it's probably he doesn't have probably many 80 point wins. It's going to be like 60 or 100. And when you're optimizing for cash games, like you're going by this like mean projection, that's not necessarily like for instance, I would be scared as all hell to play Chaos Williams in cash games tomorrow because like yeah, he's plus 115 inside the distance, which is great for 8,200. But he's only like his minus 130 to win. I mean, like his win equity is not he's not that big of a favorite. So like he loses like 45% of the time and he doesn't have volume. So let's say he loses a decision, he may only have like 15 points. I mean, like literally you're sitting there with 15 points going, why did I play this guy? Of course you love it when he knocks him out in the first round, but like typically I stray away from those types of fighters when possible, but I won't like avoid all of them, right? Especially if they're huge favorites. Like playing Tom Nolan in cash, I don't think is bad, even though from a ceiling perspective, like if he wins in the third round, like he's still giving you like 80, like he's still giving you, he's such a big favorite to win that, okay, maybe I don't get 100, but I'm getting points. I just don't want to be stuck in the scenarios where I'm playing mid-range fighters that lose a decision and still only give me 20 points because they just don't fight in a way where like their median result is very good.
Yeah. I'll defend Despain in cash last week that his win equity was actually better than like the fighters below him and a couple of the fighters above him, I think. So that I think that was the way you could argue is that like if you drop down a couple $100 or up a couple $100, like the fighters around him weren't that good. And like and also Waldo Cortez Acosta, like his Cortez Acosta, his opponent's first round win odds weren't that good. So like Despaigne actually put up like 12 points because I think that fight went to distance or it went into the third round. So like the problem is Robelis isn't that high volume, even lasting the 3 rounds. But like that, there is an argument that like, well, if Despaigne won, it was going to be a huge score, and he had better chances to win than the fighters priced around him. And if he lost, like his score is like in a hypothetically at least wasn't going to be that low because if he lost, it was likely to be a like third round loss, which it ended up being. He just wasn't high volume enough, to even put up a lot of points in a 3 round loss.
Right. Well, that's why a lot of times in cash, I don't mind. Like to me, the secret of playing cash games in UFC is typically you're playing your underdog is typically going to be a women's fighter, right? Because those fights tend to go much like I wouldn't put it past playing Vanessa Demopoulos in cash, even though that seems like an awful idea. But if you're like or even Carnelossi, against Piero Rodriguez, I definitely aim for those fights because it's not necessarily their line. I kind of look at their opponents inside the distance line and go, well, if Ducati's +4, the betting odds say that Ducati wins inside the distance 20% of the time. 80% of the time it goes the distance. So 80% of the time, I'm probably going to get 30, 35 points or something out of a 7K fighter. And then 20% of the time, I'm getting the 30 points because they wanted Vanessa Demopoulos has won the decision. And now I'm getting 65 points. And it's I don't play cash games often in UFC DFS. I tend to aim for those, especially on the underdog side. Dude, last week, I would not have played Terrence McKinney in cash games, right? Because 7,300. Yeah, when he wins in the first round, you're gonna need him. But if that doesn't happen, he scores no point. And he's a 2-to-1 dog in the fight. Those are typically the fighters that. I see other people playing in cash, maybe not the sharper players. Those are the ones that I typically avoid.
Yeah. So we actually had the UFC live final playdown round last week, and Terrence McKinney was 70% owned. I had 3 lineups. I didn't have him in, and I just started betting.
You made it to the live final, right?
Yeah. So it'll be in a couple of weeks. So I made it to the live final. I was 1 point away from being the only person that had 2 entries out of the top 15. But I got one in. I just immediately bet Terrence McKinney because I didn't have him in any of my 3 lineups, and he was 70% owned. 67% owned. And I thought that's not a good, that's not a good play because he in a win he's going to look great, but in a loss he's going to put up 3. I think he put up 5. And I don't think Terrence McKinney was a good call there. Not to call out my opponents. Having said that, I think I had 2 out of the 3 had Rebellis, and I think all 3 of my lineups had Rebecca, who ended up losing. But I agree. Right. Vanessa Demopoulos is your lady in cash this week. She averages over 30 points in her UFC losses. There's actually, there's a nice gap between her and Worley Alves. 200-point gap between her and Worley Alves, who puts up less than 30 points in his losses. Victor Martinez is the person you absolutely want to avoid. With Tom Nolan having a 40-something% chance of winning in the first round. That'll be a nice 2-3 point score for Victor Martinez, if assuming the fight goes that way. Tuco Tokus will probably be about similar to Victor Martinez. We don't have those lines out yet. And he's a little bit of an unknown. But yeah, I think it's Vanessa Demopoulos is the fighter that you want. I'll probably be over the field on her in tournaments as well, with my new philosophy that I'm kind of trying out, that those floor points, even in tournaments over the long term, are maybe a little bit more useful than the ownership indicates.
Peter Corey said all the sharper players went McKinney in cash last week.
Yeah.
And I put the quotes. All the sharper players went McKinney, just because you see them a lot doesn't make them the sharpest players. It's just the ones that you see the most often. If I would have built the cash lineup last week, it wouldn't have had Terrence. It wouldn't have had Terrence McKinney.
Yeah,
and although I probably would have still played Rebellis. I still would have played Rebecca and Despani. I just wouldn't have played McKinney. And if I would have made a cash lineup last week, I probably would have tried to figure out a way to not play Rebellis Despani either. But the way the salaries worked last week, him at 9K versus Rebecca at 9,500, there's a big. Just the same reason why you prefer Magomedov over Yanez and Nolan, because he's 9,000, and especially in cash games where you're looking for 6 wins, or you're looking for 5 wins and then a stack of the main event. That salary gets you a lot of win equity by not having you have to, play some of these really bad win equity fighters. So it's if you built a lot, like in cash this week, I'd be more inclined. I mean, we typically don't talk about cash, but while we're here, like this is, I mean, the main event is going to probably go 5 rounds, and it's mid-priced, so you just play both of them. I think for a ceiling, that's not necessarily great. So we got those two in there, and they have 84.50. So what would you do from here? Like, would you be playing Nolan? I mean, Nolan has the highest like projection. I mean, truthfully, against Victor Martinez, I'm not really. I don't think I'm not as concerned that he's going to lose the fight. Truthfully, right? And even if he doesn't get a first round knockout, would you put Tom Nolan as your like that's your top end, or would you go to Sai? Would you play Yanez, or would you not even go up there and just play a Magomedov and just go in the mid range?
I'm serious that the next fighter I would click on is Demopoulos, and then I would see what I got, see what I can afford. Because yeah,
89.33 average for 3 fighters.
What's the average?
3 fighters. Would you go to this Angela Hill Luana Pinheiro fight? Because that's another women's MMA fight. We take a look here, right? Angela Hill is plus 550 inside the distance, and Pinheiro is plus 500. Like, this is the fight that is the most likely to go the distance. It's a closely lined fight. I mean, would you put like Luana Pinheiro in? The underdog?
I'd probably put Angela Hill in. I actually kind of like Angela Hill this week. I think 2 of her last 3 wins in the UFC have been 3-round decisions where she scored over 100 points. And she's only 8,300. Okay. She's the favorite, and she's going to see low ownership. I would strongly consider Angela Hill for this kind of cash lineup. And I will probably aim to be over the field on her in tournaments as well. Like, she's the ideal fighter that I'm kind of trying to target with like my new philosophy that like she can put up a 100-point score in a win. And if in a loss, like, yeah, maybe she's getting like a 50-point loss. So yeah, I think she's a great option for like, for this kind of lineup. And for smaller field tournament kind of lineups.
And look what you could do. You put her in there and you could play Tom Nolan and Magomedov.
Yep.
Right. And if you play, instead of playing Angela Hill, if you played Luana Pinheiro, you could play Tom Nolan and Adrian Yanez.
Yeah.
Right. You could do something like that. Or Omar, or any, you want to go from Nolan to Sai, if you want to go down, like you could play 2 of these 9K fighters. Like, to me, this is like, I wouldn't be playing the Garimbo Ramaj fight or the Williams Harris fight in cash, only because it's like, yeah, whoever wins probably scores a bunch of points, but the fights are lined close enough that good luck. Like, you play Garimbo and he loses, like, you're like, because Ramaj wins. I mean, like, you look at Angela Hill and you go, why the hell am I playing Angela Hill? It's like, because like worst case scenario, you're probably getting like 45 points. Like, right. Best case scenario, she wins and has some volume and she ends up with 90 points. It's like you're avoiding a lot of the times where you get 5 or 10, especially in fights that are lined very close. Like the knock that you said earlier that you have against like someone like Adrian Yanez or Tom Nolan is that outside of a first round finish, they probably don't hit the optimal, but you're playing cash games. The likelihood of them winning, like, even if they're not optimal, is just high. Why wouldn't you want to play? I mean, if Adrian Yanez goes out and, like, gives me 82 points, I'm not like, yeah, I'm not going to win a GPP, but in cash games, let the people playing Chaos Williams sweat and go, is he going to score 100 or is he going to score 10? Like,
yeah. It's UFC, like, DFS is actually, it's set up really well to be compelling because like there's just enough fighters in our lineups. They like, one of these, if you have a bunch of fights that are 80-20, like one of them is probably going to go the other way. And that just knocks out so many lineups. That it really does get interesting. And like I think you just made like 2 really good. I don't think we're supposed to do that on these shows. Like, you just made 2 really good lineups that are, for not just like cash games, but like, not just double ups, but like triple ups, 10Xs, even quintuple ups, like,
or even the fight, like that lineup that we built. I mean, even you could stack the main event in the 555. I mean, as the payout structure gets a little top heavy, I'm less likely to do that, but I don't think that's like awful.
I don't think it's off. Yeah, and like these guys are just a little bit low volume for that kind of thing. But if they were just a little bit higher volume, like that's totally feasible. Yeah, and you see that with like if it was like Max Holloway and Poirier or something like that, I would be like, yeah, you could absolutely do that. And then especially if they were the only 5-round fight, it would be like, oh yeah, like you can stick that volume in, and then take other people that have high floors, and like suddenly you've got a lineup that's got a pretty good floor and also like a pretty good ceiling.
So you'll have the takedowns article for premium members out later today.
We might be stretching it today. I think Friday freebies is my baseball article, hitting the nuts. So probably going to be focusing on that, but it'll be a Friday freebie. And then takedowns will probably be coming out maybe late tonight, or early tomorrow. But should be out in plenty of time, along with the expert survey and lineup HQ tags for crunch time tomorrow.
And crunch time is 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow.
Probably, yeah.
Probably. You don't even know. I love the way you don't even know. Probably.
Yeah.
It'll
probably be
4 p.m. hard.
Yeah, it'll be before the before lock, which is at 4. So.
Right. So tune into that with Mike Brown, H3 Buddha. The Grinder Pad podcast will be coming out for premium members, as well as Liam's breakdowns of each fight. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. I'll wave this at you. Give me those thumbs. I like the sneaky one across the ticker, the thumb ticker, the thummy thumb ticker, just across the board. Just like, can you do it like, and then go back to the beginning without like coming through? It's like, there's the ticker. And then it goes. See, now it's going back and forth. I'm doing like more like the news channel. Like,
okay,
that's a continuously go, right? From one way, whatever. We're having fun. Yeah. Mario Dainese has all the thumbs in the chat. That's fine. So hit that, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We got Grinders Live and Crunch Time later today for MLB, right? It's Friday. It's a pretty big slate for MLB. We got props and pick'em stuff on the site as well. So get the prop tool, get the pick'em tool, get the everything. Sign up for RotoGrinders Combo Premium. Join us in the Discord, rotogrinders.com/Discord. And I'll be back next week, rolling through. I'm always here Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern, talking about all things you're thinking about in daily fantasy, props, and pick'em on RotoGrinders Today.